Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. You find yourself standing on a warm stretch of ancient Earth, 66 million years ago, as the sun rises on what feels like an entirely ordinary day. The air is thick, humid, heavy with the smell of plants and damp soil. Insects buzz lazily. Massive shapes move through the distance with slow confidence, their footsteps low and rhythmic, like distant thunder that no one pays much attention to anymore. This world has been stable for a long time. So long, in fact, that it feels permanent. You wander through this landscape and notice how alive it is. Ferns stretch wide fronds toward the light. Flowering plants sway gently, already well established, despite what children's books might have told you. Dinosaurs move with no sense of urgency. There's no sign, no warning, no cosmic foreshadowing written into the sky. A mainstream scientific fact drifts calmly into your awareness. By this point in Earth's history, dinosaurs had dominated land ecosystems for over 160 million years, surviving ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and shifting continents. They are very good at being alive. You probably won't survive this with your eyes open. Everything around you suggests continuity. Predators hunt, herbivores graze, rivers follow the same paths they've followed for thousands of years. If you didn't know what was coming, you'd assume tomorrow would look exactly like today. That assumption, you realize, is the most dangerous thing in the universe. A quirky tidbit slides quietly into your thoughts. Some paleontologists think the dinosaurs were already in a period of evolutionary transition, with new species appearing right up until the very end, suggesting there was no long, obvious decline before disaster struck. No limping finale, just business as usual. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You keep walking, feeling the ground warm beneath your feet, listening to the layered sounds of a thriving planet. Somewhere offshore, marine reptiles patrol shallow seas. Above you, early birds dart between branches, their feathers catching the light. Small mammals scurry unseen beneath roots and leaf litter, insignificant for now, barely worth a second glance from the giants above them. Historians still argue whether dinosaurs had any chance at long-term survival, even without the coming catastrophe, or whether environmental pressures were already setting the stage for change. Standing here, though, it's hard to imagine this world ending. It feels too solid, too busy, too confident. You tilt your head back and look at the sky. Blue, empty, peaceful. Nothing interrupts it. No streaks, no fire, just clouds drifting slowly, unaware they're about to become witnesses. You let that normality sink in. This section of the story isn't about impact or extinction yet. It's about calm, about how endings rarely announce themselves, about how the most important day in Earth's history begins like any other. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're still standing beneath that calm sky, but something has changed, though not on Earth. Far beyond the blue above you, beyond the moon's future orbit, beyond anything this planet has ever needed to worry about before, a small piece of the solar system is no longer minding its own business. You don't see it yet. No one does. But a rocky body roughly 10 kilometers wide has been nudged from its long, quiet path, likely by a gravitational interaction with Jupiter or another passing object. A straightforward scientific fact settles gently into your awareness. Asteroids can remain in stable orbits for hundreds of millions of years, until a subtle gravitational shift sends them inward toward the inner planets. There's no malice involved, just physics doing what physics does. You imagine it now, a dark, irregular shape tumbling through space, cold and silent, moving faster with every passing hour. At this distance, it's nothing more than a speck against the stars. Earth is just another dot in its path. No alarms go off. The planet doesn't flinch. Back on the ground, life continues uninterrupted. A large herbivore pulls leaves from a tree with slow, methodical confidence. A predator rests in the shade, saving energy. The day is warm, productive. You get the sense that if Earth had a calendar, this date wouldn't be circled. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. If this asteroid had arrived just a few minutes earlier or later, Earth's rotation might have placed the impact in a very different location, possibly reducing the severity of the extinction. Timing, as it turns out, is everything, even on a planetary scale. You tilt your head upward again, squinting slightly, but the sky offers nothing. The asteroid is still too far away, too small, too dark. Even if you had a telescope, and you very much do not, it would blend in with the background. There's something unsettling about that invisibility. World-ending events don't always announce themselves with drama. Sometimes they just show up. Historians still argue whether the asteroid was the sole cause of the dinosaurs' extinction or whether ongoing volcanic activity and climate stress had already weakened ecosystems before the impact. The debate is complex, technical, and far removed from this peaceful moment. Standing here, you wouldn't guess the planet is fragile at all. You feel the breeze move through the plants, hear distant calls echo across the landscape. Earth feels self-sufficient, unconcerned with the wider solar system. And honestly, why wouldn't it? For billions of years, space has mostly kept its distance. Somewhere far above, the asteroid crosses the orbit of the Moon's future path. Its speed now exceeds 20 kilometers per second. It doesn't slow down. There's nothing to slow it down. Gravity, once again, is quietly doing its job. You allow yourself a small, sleepy smile at the absurdity of it all. A rock the size of a city, traveling silently through space, about to rewrite the story of life, and no one here is even looking up. If this were a movie, someone would be screaming by now. Instead, a dinosaur yawns. Relatable, honestly. You stay grounded, feeling the planet beneath your feet. The sky remains blue. The sun climbs higher. Somewhere impossibly far away, the flicker has begun. But for now, Earth is still blissfully unaware. You're still beneath that ordinary sky when the first hint arrives, not as sound, not as light, but as a subtle wrongness in the air. Far above the atmosphere, the asteroid finally makes itself known, slicing into the upper layers of sky at a speed that makes language feel inadequate. It compresses air in front of it so violently that the air itself begins to glow. To you, on the ground, it appears as a sudden flicker, a new star, bright enough to compete with the sun, even in full daylight. A solid scientific fact settles calmly into your awareness. The asteroid enters Earth's atmosphere at roughly 20 kilometers per second, heating the surrounding air to temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. This is not falling. This is impact physics arriving early. You look up now. Everyone looks up now. Shadows sharpen. The light is harsh, white-blue, wrong for this time of day. The object grows rapidly, not moving like a bird or a cloud, but tearing across the sky with terrifying intent. There is still no sound. Sound lags behind. That silence stretches, taut and fragile. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts, oddly out of place. If you were close enough, the brightness alone could cause temporary blindness, even before the asteroid hits. The sky itself has become dangerous to look at. Nature, once again, skips the warning label. The asteroid is no longer a point. It's a streak, then a fireball, then something too large, too fast, too final. The air heats, pressure builds, trees sway without wind. Animals react in confusion, not fear. Fear requires context, and this has none. Historians still argue whether any animals near the impact site would have died instantly from heat, pressure, or seismic shock, or whether some survived the initial moments only to perish shortly after. From where you stand, the distinction feels academic. This is already too much. The ground trembles, not from the impact yet, but from the shockwave racing ahead of it, compressing the atmosphere like a slapped drum. Your ears would hurt if you had time to notice. The light intensifies again, a final blinding flare as the asteroid reaches the end of sky and the beginning of Earth. For a fraction of a second, the world is brighter than it has ever been and ever will be again. Then the asteroid hits. You don't see the crater form. No one does. The energy released is equivalent to billions of nuclear weapons detonating at once. Rock behaves like liquid. The crust rebounds. The planet itself rings like a struck bell. This is the moment the story turns irreversible. The shockwave begins its outward sprint, faster than sound, faster than comprehension. Forests flatten, animals are thrown, the ground heaves as if trying to escape itself. Somewhere far away from where you stand, Earth has been permanently changed. You remain suspended in that instant, not because it lasts long, but because it feels like everything after this must be different. The flicker in the sky is gone. In its place, a wound. And the planet hasn't even begun to respond yet. You don't experience the impact as a single moment so much as a spreading realization. The asteroid has struck far away, but the planet itself is still ringing, shuddering, trying to process what just happened. You feel it first through the ground beneath your feet. A deep, rolling motion, not sharp like an earthquake you might recognize, but vast and heavy. As if the Earth has briefly forgotten how to be solid. A clear scientific fact settles into your awareness. The Chicxulub impact released so much energy that it triggered earthquakes equivalent to magnitude 10 or higher, sending seismic waves racing through the entire planet. These waves don't stop at coastlines or mountains. They move through everything, rearranging the surface as they go. Trees begin to sway violently, even though there's still no wind. Animals lose their footing. Rivers slosh out of their banks as the ground ripples beneath them. You sense the shockwave racing outward through the atmosphere now, a compressed wall of air moving faster than sound, flattening forests hundreds, then thousands of kilometers from the impact site. When the sound finally arrives, it's not a single noise. It's a layered roar, thunder, tearing, a pressure that feels like it's squeezing your chest and ears at the same time. The air itself seems to shove you hard, as if the planet is shrugging. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some models suggest that winds near the impact site may have exceeded the speed of the strongest hurricanes by several times, briefly turning the atmosphere into a planet-wide blast furnace of motion. Earth's weather system didn't just break, it panicked. You watch as distant trees snap, not from fire yet, but from force alone. Large animals are thrown off balance, some knocked to the ground, others carried by the moving air as if gravity has taken a momentary break. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Nothing living has a reference for it. Historians still argue whether the shockwave alone killed a significant percentage of land animals before any other effects began. Standing here, it feels plausible. The violence is everywhere at once, rolling outward in expanding circles, indifferent to size, strength, or evolutionary success. The sky darkens slightly, not from ash yet, but from dust and debris blasted high into the atmosphere. Fine particles begin to fall, stinging against skin and leaves. They're warm, some are hot. Pebbles rain down, flung far beyond the impact site, landing with sharp, unsettling taps. You realize the shockwave hasn't finished its first lap around the planet. It will circle Earth multiple times, reflecting, interfering with itself, keeping the ground unsettled for hours. There will be no immediate calm, no chance to regroup. A soft, modern aside slips in uninvited. Even the largest earthquakes in recorded human history are whispers compared to this. Instruments would be overwhelmed, scales would break, language would fail. You remain still, not because it's safe, but because there's nowhere to go. The planet is reacting now, releasing energy it didn't ask for and doesn't know how to absorb. This stage of the story isn't about fire or darkness yet. It's about force. Raw, blind, planetary force. As the shockwave continues its relentless spread, you feel the certainty settle in. Whatever Earth was this morning, it is not that anymore. The changes are already global, already permanent, and the worst effects are still on their way. You don't have much time to process the shockwave before the sky itself begins to turn against the surface. High above, far beyond where clouds normally live, debris blasted from the impact is already arcing back toward Earth. Trillions of fragments, rock vapor, molten droplets, pulverized crust, reach the top of the atmosphere and begin their long, inevitable return. At first it's subtle. A faint glow appears along the horizon, like a distant sunset in every direction at once. Then it grows brighter, hotter. You realize the night sky, where there should be none yet, is beginning to shimmer. A clear scientific fact settles into your awareness. Material ejected by the Chicxulub impact re-entered Earth's atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, heating the air globally and raising surface temperatures dramatically for hours. This wasn't fire spreading from place to place. It was heat arriving everywhere at once. You feel it on your skin. The air warms rapidly. Then painfully, leaves curl. Dry plant matter begins to smolder without a spark. Forests don't catch fire in lines or patches. They ignite almost simultaneously, as if the planet has been placed under a massive broiler. Above you, the sky glows orange-red, streaked with countless falling embers. It looks beautiful in the way only total disaster ever does. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind, oddly calm. Some researchers describe this phase as a global re-entry heating event, which is a remarkably polite way to say the atmosphere briefly became an oven. Animals react now with panic, not confusion. There is nowhere to run. No water deep enough, no shade dense enough. Even those far from the impact site feel the heat pressing down, relentless and impartial. Historians still argue whether these global wildfires were continuous across continents or occurred in vast but broken regions, depending on local conditions. From where you stand, the distinction doesn't matter. The smell of smoke is everywhere. The sky rains fire. You notice ash beginning to fall, mixing with the earlier debris. The light dims even as the heat intensifies. Day and night lose their meaning. The sun is still there, but it's irrelevant now, overpowered by what the planet itself is doing. The fires feed on oxygen, on dry biomass, on entire ecosystems built over millions of years. Smoke columns rise and merge, punching into the stratosphere. You sense that this isn't just destruction, it's preparation for something worse. The atmosphere is being loaded, darkened, altered. A soft, modern aside slips in, almost absurd. This makes every wildfire in recorded human history look like a campfire demonstration. There would be no firefighting, no containment, no natural breaks. Earth itself is the fuel. Hours pass. The heat slowly eases, but the fires do not. They spread, burn, consume. By the time the embers stop falling, much of the world is already transformed into ash and smoke. You stand in the glow of burning horizons and realize this phase isn't the end, it's the transition. The planet has been seared, and now it's about to go dark. You drift away from the burning land and out over the oceans, hoping, instinctively, that water might offer some kind of refuge. From above, the seas look vast and calm as they always have, but that calm is already an illusion. The impact didn't stop at the continents. It punched straight through the planet's systems, and the oceans are only just beginning to react. Far from shore, the water suddenly pulls back, exposing seafloor that hasn't seen daylight in millions of years. A solid scientific fact settles into your awareness. The Chicxulub impact generated massive tsunamis, some estimated to be hundreds of meters tall near the impact site, racing across entire ocean basins. These are not waves you surf. They are walls of moving ocean. You watch as the water returns with terrifying purpose. Coastlines vanish under advancing fronts of foam and debris. Reefs are shredded. Sediment is ripped from the seafloor and hurled inland, then dragged back out again, over and over, as the planet oscillates from the blow. The sea doesn't just flood, it scours. A quirky tidbit drifts lazily through your thoughts. Evidence of these tsunamis has been found thousands of kilometers from the impact site, preserved as chaotic layers of sand and rubble far inland. The oceans, it seems, wrote their panic directly into the rock record. Beneath the surface, conditions are changing just as violently. Shockwaves travel through the water, compressing and heating it locally. Marine life is tossed, disoriented, crushed against reefs, or pulled into turbulent currents they've never evolved to handle. This isn't a slow drowning, it's instant upheaval. Historians still argue whether the majority of marine extinctions were caused directly by these initial oceanic disturbances or by the longer-term collapse of food chains that followed. From where you float, it feels like the oceans are being hit from every direction at once, physically, chemically, and thermally. Ash and soot begin to settle onto the water's surface, forming slicks that block sunlight. Acid rain follows soon after, the result of vaporized rock and sulfur compounds mixing high in the atmosphere. The rain tastes wrong, the water chemistry shifts. Plankton, tiny, foundational, easy to overlook, begin to struggle. You realize how dependent everything is on these microscopic drifters? They form the base of marine food webs, quietly converting sunlight into life. Without light, without stability, they falter. The oceans don't scream when this happens, they simply begin to empty. A soft modern aside slips in, uncomfortably relevant. Even today, changes to ocean chemistry ripple upward through ecosystems with frightening efficiency. Back then, there were no safeguards, no recovery plans, just momentum. The waves eventually lose height as they cross entire basins, but they don't stop. They rebound, interfere, overlap. Coastlines are reshaped repeatedly in a matter of hours. What was once shallow sea becomes land. What was land becomes seabed. Maps are meaningless now. You drift above it all, aware that while the fires dominated the land, the oceans are quietly absorbing their own share of catastrophe. They don't burn, but they break, churn, and darken. As ash continues to fall and sunlight fades, the seas grow colder, dimmer, less productive. The upheaval isn't finished. It's settling into a slower, deeper crisis, one that will last far longer than the waves themselves. You let yourself hover there, above the restless water, sensing that the planet has now been wounded everywhere at once. Land, air, and sea are no longer separate chapters. They're part of the same unraveling story. You drift onward into a world that no longer knows what time of day it is. The sun still rises and sets technically, but its light struggles to reach the surface. Ash, soot, and fine dust now fill the atmosphere, spreading out until the sky becomes a permanent bruise-colored twilight. Noon looks like dusk. Dusk looks like night. The planet has pulled a veil over itself. A solid scientific fact settles quietly into your awareness. The Chicxulub impact injected vast amounts of dust and sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere, blocking sunlight globally and triggering a rapid drop in surface temperatures. This phase is often called an impact winter, and it arrives faster than any ice age ever could. You feel the temperature fall, not gradually, abruptly. Warmth leaks away from the ground, from the air, from living bodies that evolved under a reliable sun. Frost forms where fire burned only days ago. Smoke still lingers, but now it smells cold, stale, exhausted. Plants are the first to struggle. Photosynthesis slows, then fails. Leaves yellow, curl, drop. Forests that survived the fires now face starvation. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. Some estimates suggest sunlight levels drop to less than 10% of normal, essentially putting the entire planet into deep shade. Historians still argue how long this darkness lasted, months, years, or more than a decade. But standing here, duration feels irrelevant. Even a single growing season lost is catastrophic. Multiple lost seasons are extinction. You move through the landscape and notice how quiet it's becoming. Insects vanish first, then the animals that depend on them. Herbivores weaken as plants fail. Predators weaken soon after. Food chains don't snap all at once. They unravel, strand by strand. Snow falls in places that have never known it. Tropical regions cool to near-freezing temperatures. The familiar sounds of life, calls, movement, constant background noise, fade into long stretches of silence broken only by wind and settling ash. A soft, modern aside slips in. This is what happens when the base of a system collapses. No amount of strength at the top can compensate when energy stops entering at the bottom. You sense the dinosaurs now, not as rulers of the planet, but as animals caught in a world that no longer supports their needs. Size, once an advantage, becomes a liability. Large bodies require constant fuel, constant warmth. Neither is available anymore. You drift beneath the dim sky as days blur together. The sun is a pale disk, barely visible, like a memory rather than a source. The planet feels smaller, colder, and strangely empty. This stage of the story isn't loud like the impact or dramatic like the fires. It's quiet, relentless, patient. Darkness doesn't need force, it just needs time. And time, right now, is not on the dinosaurs' side. You move through the dimness now, and the giants are no longer distant silhouettes of power. They are close, too close. You see them not as rulers of the land, but as animals struggling within bodies that suddenly feel like liabilities. The cold presses in. Hunger stretches out into something constant and dull. The largest dinosaurs move more slowly now. Their energy reserves drain fast in a world where plants have stopped growing and prey is disappearing. A clear scientific fact settles into your awareness. Large animals are far more vulnerable to rapid environmental change because they require enormous, steady caloric intake. When ecosystems collapse, size becomes a disadvantage almost overnight. You follow a herd moving across ash-covered ground. They pause often, heads low, searching for anything green. There isn't much. Leaves are brittle or gone. Seeds never sprouted. What food remains is poor in nutrition, starved of sunlight long before it reached their mouths. Predators fare no better. You notice one resting longer than it should, conserving energy it cannot replace. Hunting now costs more than it returns. Failed chases are common. Success is rare. Even when a kill happens, it doesn't last long. Too many mouths, too little meat, too much competition. A quirky tidbit drifts quietly into your thoughts. Some paleontologists suggest that certain smaller dinosaurs with feathers may have survived slightly longer by retaining heat better, though even that advantage wasn't enough in the long run. Evolution gave them tools, but not quite the right ones for this moment. Historians still argue whether any non-avian dinosaurs survived for years after the impact, or whether extinction was effectively complete within months. Standing here, the timeline blurs. What matters is inevitability. The systems that sustain these animals are gone, and no amount of adaptation can rebuild them fast enough. You notice how behavior changes, movement slows, aggression fades. Survival replaces dominance. There's no drama in it, no final charge, just exhaustion. Bodies that evolved for abundance are now trapped in scarcity. The landscape itself feels quieter, heavier. Carcasses appear and vanish quickly, stripped clean by whatever remains. Then even the scavengers thin out. The world simplifies, brutally and efficiently. A soft, modern aside slips in, hushed. Extinction rarely looks like a single moment. It looks like this: energy draining away, options narrowing, life quietly failing to keep up with conditions it never prepared for. You stay with the scene, not rushing past it. This isn't about spectacle. It's about scale, about how dominance over millions of years can unravel in what feels like no time at all. Eventually, movement becomes rare. Silence settles in layers. The giants are still here, but not for long. The age that defined the planet is ending, not with a roar, but with a slow, collective exhale into the cold. You drift onward through a world that has grown simpler in the harshest possible way. With the giants fading, the intricate networks that once connected plants, herbivores, predators, and scavengers begin to fail entirely. This stage isn't marked by spectacle. It's marked by absence. You notice plants first. Without sunlight, without warmth, without stable seasons, most photosynthetic life has already collapsed. A grounded scientific fact settles into your awareness. When primary producers fail, entire ecosystems unravel from the bottom up because all higher life depends, directly or indirectly, on their energy. No plants means no food. No food means no future. You walk through what was once a vibrant forest. The trees stand bare or toppled, their leaves long gone. The ground is coated in ash and frost. There are no insects humming, no small movements in the undergrowth. Even decay has slowed, starved of the warmth and microbial activity it depends on. The planet feels paused, as if life itself has taken a long, uncertain breath. A quirky tidbit drifts gently through your thoughts. Some fungi may have briefly flourished during this time, feeding on the massive amounts of dead organic matter. In a strange way, the world belonged to decomposers for a while, quiet recyclers working through the remains of an age. You begin to understand that extinction doesn't move evenly. Some species vanish quickly, others linger, isolated, doomed not by violence but by logistics. Too little food, too few mates, too much cold. Populations drop below recovery thresholds and simply stop. Historians still argue how long this ecological freefall lasted, whether the most severe collapse played out over years or decades. From where you stand, it feels timeless. Without seasons to mark progress, time loses its structure. Days blur, weeks dissolve. Survival becomes a waiting game that almost no one wins. You notice rivers running clearer now, no longer choked with plant matter or sediment from healthy ecosystems. Oceans grow quieter, their food webs truncated. The planet is not dead, but it is profoundly diminished. A soft, modern side slips in, reflective and calm. Complexity is fragile. It takes millions of years to build, and surprisingly little time to dismantle. Once enough connections are broken, recovery becomes almost impossible. You pause and listen. The silence is layered, not empty exactly, but stripped down to essentials. A few hardy species remain, clinging to niches that still function. But the great interconnected web that defined this world is gone. This section of the story isn't about dinosaurs anymore. It's about systems, about how life depends not just on survival, but on relationships, between sunlight and leaf, leaf and grazer, grazer and predator. Break enough of those links and the chain doesn't hold. You drift onward, aware that what's left of the old world is thinning rapidly. The collapse has passed its tipping point. From here on, the future belongs only to those small enough, adaptable enough, and patient enough to wait. You drift gently into the aftermath, where the noise has faded and the chaos has burned itself out. This world is quieter now, not peaceful, just emptied. And in that emptiness, you begin to notice movement again, subtle and close to the ground. Small creatures endure. You follow one carefully, no bigger than a squirrel, moving through leaf litter and ash with cautious precision. A clear scientific fact settles into your awareness. Many small animals survived the mass extinction because they needed less food, reproduced faster, and could shelter underground or in water, insulated from the worst heat and cold. Survival, it turns out, favored modesty. Burrows become lifelines. Underground spaces buffer temperature swings, block ash, and hide fragile bodies from the worst of the surface world. You sense how important waiting has become. Not fighting, not dominating, just enduring long enough for conditions to change. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some early mammals may have survived by eating seeds and carrion, food sources that persisted even after plants stopped growing. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Evolution doesn't reward pride. You notice reptiles, amphibians, insects, organisms with flexible metabolisms, slow needs, and the ability to pause their lives without dying. Hibernation, torpor, dormancy. Strategies that once seemed like side notes are now decisive advantages. Historians still argue exactly which traits mattered most for survival: diet, body size, reproduction rate, or sheer luck. From where you hover, it feels like a combination of all of them, braided together with timing and geography. The world above ground remains hostile. Cold persists, light is weak, but underground in soil and sediment, life holds on. Eggs wait, seeds wait, spores wait. The planet has not reset, it has compressed. A soft modern aside slips in. Resilience rarely looks dramatic. It looks like patience, like staying small, like not giving up space you can protect. You follow one small mammal as it pauses, sniffing the air, then retreats again. It doesn't know it's surviving an extinction. It only knows what it needs to do today. That's enough. Gradually, very gradually, the darkness begins to thin. Ash settles. The sun strengthens incrementally. These survivors don't rush upward. They've learned caution. They've learned that waiting is not the same as failing. You drift back and realize something profound. The future of the planet is no longer decided by strength, size, or dominance. It's being decided quietly, underground, by creatures no one would have noticed before. The age of giants has ended, and the age of the small, adaptable, and patient is already beginning. You drift into a world that feels unfamiliar, even though it's the same planet beneath your feet. The violence has passed, the fires have burned themselves out. The sky, while still dim, no longer rains ash in thick curtains. What remains is silence, wide, heavy, and deeply unsettling. You move through the landscape slowly because there's nothing urging you forward anymore. The ground is bare in places where forests once stood. Charred trunks rise like blackened ribs. Elsewhere, frost still clings stubbornly to shaded soil, lingering far longer than it ever did before. A clear scientific fact settles into your awareness. After the Chicxulub impact, global temperatures remained suppressed for years, delaying ecological recovery long after the initial darkness began to lift. You notice how empty everything feels. Large animals are gone now, not hiding, not weakened, just absent. Their paths remain pressed into the ground. Their nests and feeding sites sit unused. The planet remembers them even when they're no longer here. A quirky tidbit drifts gently through your thoughts. Fossil evidence suggests that some places may have smelled strongly of decay for years, as massive amounts of dead organic matter broke down slowly in the cold, oxygen-poor aftermath. Even the air carried memory. Water moves differently now. Rivers run shallow but clear, no longer choked with life or sediment. Ponds stagnate, ringed with lifeless shorelines. Oceans remain muted, their surface calmer, their depths less productive. The planet hasn't stopped functioning, but it's functioning at a reduced setting, like a machine idling after a major breakdown. Historians still argue whether ecosystems began recovering almost immediately once sunlight returned, or whether the biosphere remained stalled for tens of thousands of years before true regrowth took hold. Standing here, it feels like hesitation, like the Earth itself is cautious, unsure whether it's safe to invest in abundance again. You walk across ground that will one day support new forests, but for now, it's dominated by opportunists. Hardy plants, fast-growing ferns, simple life forms that don't ask much from the environment. Complexity has been stripped away. What remains is the foundation. There's something oddly peaceful about it in a stark, minimal kind of way. Without the constant motion of large animals, the planet feels slower. Wind becomes more noticeable. Water sounds louder. Space opens up. A soft modern aside slips in, reflective. This is what a reset looks like. Not a clean slate, but a scarred one. Life doesn't start over. It rebuilds from what survived. You pause and take in the horizon. There's no drama left here. No towering figures. No dominant presence. Just a quiet world waiting to see what comes next. This section of the story isn't about extinction anymore. It's about aftermath, about the strange calm that follows catastrophe, about the pause between endings and beginnings. You drift onward, aware that while the age of dinosaurs has truly ended, the planet itself is not finished. Beneath the soil, in sheltered corners, in eggs and seeds and small breathing bodies, something new is already preparing, patiently, to rise. You drift forward in time again, slowly, carefully, as if the planet itself is still learning how to move without the giants that once defined it. The darkness has lifted now. The sun returns to something close to its old strength. Seasons begin to reassert themselves, tentative at first, like a system testing its own memory. The world is green again, but not the same green. Ferns spread quickly across the scarred land, unfurling in vast carpets where forests once stood. A clear scientific fact settles into your awareness. After the dinosaur extinction, fast-growing plants like ferns dominated early recovery landscapes, a pattern so consistent it's known as a fern spike in the fossil record. The planet, it seems, reaches first for whatever grows fastest. You notice movement at ground level. Small mammals venture farther from their burrows now. They climb, they dig, they explore. With large predators gone, space has opened. Not just physical space, but evolutionary space. Opportunities that didn't exist before are suddenly everywhere. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some early mammals began experimenting with entirely new lifestyles during this time: tree climbing, gliding, specialized diets, behaviors that would have been far riskier in a world dominated by large reptiles. Absence, it turns out, can be a powerful creative force. Historians still argue whether mammals were destined to rise eventually, or whether this moment was a rare evolutionary accident, dependent on timing, location, and a very unlucky asteroid. From where you float, it feels fragile either way. Change this one event and the future rewrites itself. You move across the recovering Earth and sense a quiet rebuilding underway. Insects return. Pollination resumes. Food webs reconnect. Slowly, imperfectly. Nothing snaps back into place. It all grows forward, uneven and experimental. You feel the weight of what's ended and the lightness of what's beginning. This isn't triumph, it's transition. The planet hasn't chosen mammals over dinosaurs. It has simply continued, working with what remains. A soft modern aside settles gently into your awareness. Everything familiar to you, forests, birdsong, mammals with curious eyes, flows from this moment. Not from victory, but from survival. You drift upward, away from the surface, watching continents breathe with life again. The age of dinosaurs has closed. Another chapter is opening, not louder, not grander, just different. The final day of the dinosaurs was not the end of life's story. You let your movement slow now, easing into stillness as the earth continues below you, quietly rebuilding, quietly forgetting, quietly remembering. There's no urgency left in this story. The drama has passed. What remains is time. Long, generous, patient time. You feel how life settles back into rhythm. Not the old rhythm, a new one. Softer, more cautious. The planet doesn't rush to replace what it lost. It experiments, it waits. It allows space for small things to matter. Your breathing slows as well, syncing with that gentler pace. Inhale, exhale. The same forces that ended one age also made room for another. Gravity still holds the world together. Sunlight still feeds the surface. Seasons still turn, even if they turn differently now. You don't need to hold on to the details anymore. The ash has settled, the noise has faded. What matters has already happened, and what's coming will unfold whether you watch it or not. There's comfort in that. If the planet can lose its giants and still find a way forward, then uncertainty doesn't have to mean failure. Sometimes it just means change unfolding slowly enough to survive. You imagine the Earth at night now, millions of years later, quiet under the stars. Somewhere in that future, a small mammal looks up, briefly curiously, before returning to its life. No awareness of asteroids, no memory of fire, just existence continuing. You are allowed to rest the same way,